The audience fell completely silent as my parents stood up mid-performance, their chairs scraping harshly against the polished theater floor. My mother's voice cut through the hushed space like a knife through silk. "You lied to us, Ava. You're humiliating this family." The spotlight burned on my tear-streaked face as they stormed toward the exit. The crowd began murmuring, a wave of confusion rippling through the rows. Still trembling, I forced myself to smile and somehow finished my monologue. My voice cracked on the final line, but I held my position until the lights dimmed. The applause that followed felt like knives piercing my skin. Each clap reminded me that hundreds of people had just witnessed my parents publicly disowning me. My hands shook as I took my bow. Through blurred vision, I watched the empty seats where they'd been sitting. 2 vacant spaces that suddenly felt like craters in my chest. Backstage, the other actors avoided my eyes. Nobody knew what to say. What do you say to someone whose parents just called them a disgrace in front of everyone? I stumbled to my dressing room and locked the door behind me. I collapsed into the chair facing the mirror. My makeup was smeared, black streaks of mascara running down both cheeks. "My name is Ava Marin," I whispered to my reflection. "And tonight, my parents disowned me." The words felt unreal. Like I was still performing. Like this was just another scene from a play. But the ache in my chest told me otherwise. This was painfully, devastatingly real. A knock sounded at the door. "Ava." It was Marcus, my director. I opened it slowly. He stepped inside and wrapped his arms around me without saying anything. "You were brilliant," he finally whispered into my hair. "Absolutely brilliant." But all I could hear was my father's voice echoing endlessly in my head. "You've brought shame to us." Those 5 words played on repeat like a broken record I couldn't turn off. "They're gone," I said flatly. Marcus nodded. "I know. But you stayed. You finished. That takes real courage." I laughed bitterly. "Courage? I just lost my family." He pulled back and looked me directly in the eyes. "No. They lost you. There's a difference." I wanted to believe him. Wanted to feel empowered and strong. But mostly I just felt abandoned. I grew up in a house where silence meant peace and obedience meant love. My parents were both doctors. Respected, admired, rigid in their beliefs about success. My father used to say constantly, "We don't chase dreams, Ava. We chase stability." Every dinner conversation revolved around medical school rankings, prestigious residency programs, and which specialist made the most money. Art was frivolous. Creativity was impractical. Dreams were dangerous distractions from real life. I was their pride and joy throughout high school. Top of my class. Perfect grades. Accepted into pre-med programs at 3 universities before I even graduated. At every family gathering, relatives would pat my head and say, "She's going to be a brilliant surgeon." My parents would beam with satisfaction. I'd smile and nod, playing the role they'd written for me since birth. But no one knew that at night, after everyone slept, I'd rehearse lines from plays I found online. I'd whisper Shakespeare under my blanket, performing for an audience of stuffed animals. I'd practice accents and memorize monologues from movies I'd watched in secret. Theater was my hidden addiction. My parents never suspected because I was so good at being exactly what they wanted during daylight hours. When my parents went away to a medical conference during my sophomore year, I saw my chance. The university theater troupe was holding auditions for their spring production. My roommate practically dragged me there. "You're always practicing," she'd said. "Just try once." My knees shook violently as I stepped onto that stage. The empty theater felt enormous. Intimidating. The panel of 3 directors sat in the front row, clipboards in hand. I performed a monologue from a contemporary play about family expectations. Every word felt like confession. Like I was finally speaking my truth out loud instead of whispering it in darkness. When I finished, the theater was completely silent. I thought I'd failed miserably. Then the lead director smiled. "That was remarkable. Thank you, Ava." 2 days later, the email arrived. "Congratulations, you got the lead role in our spring production." I read it 17 times. My hands trembled with pure joy. I literally screamed into my pillow. For 5 glorious minutes, I let myself feel ecstatic. Then reality crashed down. My parents would never ever allow this. They'd see it as betrayal. As throwing away my future for foolishness. I forged my class schedule with terrifying precision. I told my parents my theater rehearsals were advanced anatomy labs, that met 4 evenings per week. I created fake syllabi, downloaded medical diagrams, memorized technical terms to drop casually during our video calls. Every night after rehearsal, I'd wash the stage makeup off in the dormitory bathroom before calling home. I couldn't risk them seeing even a trace of eyeliner or lipstick. "You look exhausted," my mother would say, studying my face through the screen. Late nights studying, I'd lie, staring at my tired reflection in my phone. "We're dissecting cadavers next week." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. Guilt curled in my chest like smoke. But the alternative, telling them the truth, felt impossible. They'd make me quit immediately. They'd probably pull me out of school entirely. I became 2 different people. During the day I was pre-med Ava, carrying anatomy textbooks and attending biology lectures. At night I transformed into theater Ava, losing myself in rehearsals and character work. The double life was exhausting. But for the first time in my life I felt genuinely alive. Acting wasn't just a hobby. It was breathing. The night of our opening performance, I was applying my stage makeup when my roommate burst in. Her face was pale. "Ava," she whispered urgently. "Your mother's here. She's in the audience." My blood turned to ice. "What?" I grabbed her shoulders. "That's impossible. She's in Boston." But my roommate shook her head. "She surprised you. I just saw her taking a seat in the 3rd row." I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The stage manager called 5 minutes, but I felt frozen in place. Maybe she wouldn't recognize me in costume. Maybe she'd think it was someone who just looked like her daughter. But deep down I knew. Our eyes would meet, and everything would explode. It happened during my big emotional scene. I was mid-monologue, tears streaming down my face when I spotted her. 3rd row, center seat. My mother sat completely still, her expression unreadable. Our eyes locked. I saw shock register first, then fury, then something that looked like betrayal. I stumbled over my next line but somehow recovered. After the show I found both my parents waiting outside my dorm. Silent. Stone-faced. My father finally spoke. "Pack your things." His voice was ice. "You're coming home. Medicine or nothing." The drive home was silent. 3 hours of suffocating quiet. When we finally arrived they ordered me into the living room. Felt like walking into a courtroom. My father stood like a prosecutor. My mother sat rigid on the couch. "You'll give up acting immediately and reapply to medical school," my father declared. Not suggested. Declared. His tone left no room for discussion. My hands shook in my lap. "It's my life," I said quietly. The words felt simultaneously brave and terrifying. My mother slapped the coffee table so hard the sound echoed through the house. "We didn't raise you to embarrass us," she shouted. "Do you know what people will say? What our colleagues will think? You're throwing away everything we've built for you." My voice broke as I responded. "You raised me to fear you, not to love myself." The truth hung in the air like smoke. My father's eyes went completely cold. "Then fear losing us," he said slowly. "Because if you choose this foolishness over your family, you choose nothing. We're done." My mother nodded in agreement. For the first time in my life I saw no love in their faces. Only disappointment so deep it looked like hatred. I packed my suitcase while they pretended I didn't exist. I moved through the house like a ghost, gathering my belongings as my parents carried on normal conversations in the kitchen. They discussed dinner plans, upcoming appointments, everything except their daughter packing to leave forever. The denial was almost impressive. Almost. My mother appeared in my doorway as I zipped up my last bag. She stood there silently for what felt like an eternity. Finally she whispered, "You'll regret this." Her voice cracked slightly. For a moment I thought she might cry. Might take it all back and hug me. Tell me we'd figure it out together. But instead she just stood there, arms crossed defensively. I looked at her directly. "Maybe I will regret it," I whispered back. "But I'll regret staying even more." I walked past her, down the stairs, through the foyer. My father didn't look up from his newspaper as I passed. The front door clicked shut behind me. That sound, that quiet final click, echoed like a gunshot in my head. I stood on the porch for a moment, suitcase in hand, realizing I had nowhere to go. No family. No home. Just a dream and $200 in my checking account. I arrived in the city 3 days later with everything I owned stuffed into 2 suitcases. The apartment I could afford was tiny and smelled permanently of mold and old cigarettes. The bathroom had questionable stains. The radiator clanked all night. But it was mine. Nobody could take it from me or tell me I was wasting my life inside these walls. I got a job waiting tables at a diner downtown. The work was exhausting. My feet ached constantly. Customers were rude. Tips were unpredictable. But between shifts I auditioned for everything. Community theater. Student films. Unpaid showcase productions. Most auditions ended with polite rejections. "Thank you, we'll be in touch." They never were. Each rejection email felt like confirmation that my parents were right. Maybe I was delusional. Maybe I'd thrown away a secure future for a fantasy that would never materialize. Some nights I'd lie on my lumpy mattress and wonder if I should just call them, apologize, beg to come home, promise to go to medical school like they wanted. But every time I stepped onto a stage, even a tiny black box theater with 15 people watching, the ache in my chest transformed into fire, into purpose. Months passed without contact. Then one random Tuesday my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. My heart stopped. I almost didn't answer. Finally, on the last ring I picked up. "Hello." My voice sounded smaller than I intended. "Ava," she said formally. Not warmly. Just stating a fact. "Your cousin Angela just got engaged to a corporate lawyer. People keep asking about you at family gatherings." My throat tightened. "What do you tell them?" Silence stretched between us. "We tell them you're figuring things out." The euphemism was clear. They were ashamed. Embarrassed. I took a breath. "Tell them I'm doing what I love," I said, trying to sound confident. My mother's reply came like a dagger through the phone. "Then tell them you're unemployed and living in squalor. Because that's the truth, isn't it?" The call ended shortly after. I sat on my apartment floor, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. She hadn't asked how I was. Hadn't asked if I was eating enough or staying safe. Just wanted to remind me I'd chosen wrong. That I was failing. That their prediction was coming true. I cried for an hour, then wiped my face and went to my evening shift. After another brutal audition where I didn't even make callbacks, I broke down completely. I found myself sitting in an alley behind the theater, mascara running, unable to stop sobbing. Everything felt hopeless. Pointless. My director, Marcus, found me there 20 minutes later. "Hey," he said gently, sitting beside me on the dirty ground. "Rough day." "You don't understand," I sobbed, unable to look at him. "My family thinks I'm a complete failure. They're probably right. I'm 20 years old, broke, living in a moldy apartment and can't even book a community theater role. What am I doing?" The words poured out like poison I'd been holding in for months. Marcus smiled softly. Not mockingly. Kindly. "Then make your success so loud they can't possibly ignore it," he said simply. "Stop trying to prove them wrong quietly. Prove them wrong so loudly the whole world hears it." Something about those words planted a seed in my chest. A small, stubborn seed of determination. Maybe he was right. Maybe I'd been approaching this all wrong. Maybe I needed to stop hiding and start fighting. Really fighting. 2 weeks later, Marcus called me about an audition. An independent film production was casting for a low-budget movie about a young woman defying her parents to follow her dreams. "The pay is minimal," he warned. "But the script is incredible. And Ava, the character is basically you." He wasn't wrong. When I read the screenplay, I felt like someone had reached into my chest and pulled out my exact story. The audition was different from all the others. I didn't have to act. I just had to remember. Every scene felt like reliving my own life. The arguments with parents. The guilt. The fear of failing. The desperate need to prove yourself. When the director called cut, after my final audition scene, the room was silent. Then he smiled. "When can you start?" "I got the lead role. Me. Ava Marin. The girl whose parents said she'd never make it." We filmed for 6 weeks straight. 12-hour days. Exhausting emotional scenes. I poured every ounce of pain, anger, hope, and determination into that character. The crew kept commenting on how real my performance felt. It didn't look like acting because it wasn't. Every scene was a wound reopening. Every line was truth I'd been too afraid to speak out loud. The film premiered at a small independent festival 8 months later. I didn't expect much. Maybe a few dozen people would watch. Maybe it would get lost among thousands of other indie films nobody sees. But then something unexpected happened. A clip from the movie, my tearful monologue about earning love instead of freely receiving it, got posted online. Within 48 hours it went viral. Overnight my name started trending on social media. The video had millions of views. Comments poured in from people sharing their own stories about disappointing their parents. About choosing passion over practicality. About being brave enough to fail. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications. Interview requests. Casting directors wanting meetings. Producers asking about my availability. I sat in my tiny apartment watching the view count climb higher and higher, completely stunned. This was real. This was actually happening. But I couldn't bring myself to tell my parents. Part of me wanted to call them immediately and scream, "See? I told you." But another part wanted them to discover it on their own. To stumble across my success accidentally and realize what they'd dismissed. What they'd thrown away. A message appeared in my inbox from someone I vaguely recognized. Olivia Chin. No wait, I couldn't use that name. Olivia Harper. An old family friend who'd known my parents for decades. Ava. The message read, "Your parents saw your clip on the television news last night." They didn't know what to say. They just sat there, completely silent. My hands started shaking as I read. Did they? I typed back hesitantly. Did they like it? The 3 dots indicating she was typing appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally her response came through. They said nothing. But Ava, your mom cried. I've never seen her cry before. Your dad just kept rewinding the clip over and over. I stared at those words for a long time. I wanted to feel victorious. Vindicated. Like I'd finally proven them wrong and earned the satisfaction I'd been craving. But instead I felt empty. Hollow. Their tears didn't feel like victory. They felt like waste. Like years of love we'd all thrown away because none of us knew how to bend. I turned off my phone and sat in darkness, unsure whether to feel triumph or heartbreak. Maybe it was possible to feel both simultaneously. 1 year after that viral moment, I received a call from a major magazine. They wanted me for their cover story. The actress who defied expectations, they planned to call it. I stood in the photography studio, surrounded by professional lighting and a team of stylists, feeling completely surreal. The makeup artist chatted while working. Your parents must be incredibly proud, she said casually while applying lipstick. This is huge. I smiled faintly at my reflection. Maybe someday they will be, I replied quietly. She looked confused but didn't push. The photo shoot took 6 hours. Outfit changes. Different poses. Interview questions about my inspiring journey. They wanted to know about overcoming obstacles. About staying true to myself. About the price of following dreams. I answered honestly, though I left out the most painful details. When the magazine arrived at my apartment 2 weeks later, I stared at my face on that glossy cover for a full 10 minutes. I looked confident, successful, happy. Everything my parents said I'd never be. That night, I carefully slipped the magazine into an envelope, wrote their address in neat handwriting, and mailed it with no note inside. No explanation. No "I told you so." Just the magazine speaking for itself. Let them see what their daughter became without them. My parents attended a high society dinner party 3 weeks later. They moved through these events regularly. Doctors mingling with other successful professionals, everyone discussing their accomplished children. Usually my parents changed the subject when asked about me, or gave vague answers about me finding my path. But that night was different. One of my father's colleagues pulled out my magazine from his briefcase. "Isn't this your daughter?" he asked, genuine pride in his voice. "She's everywhere right now. My teenage daughter has her poster on the bedroom wall." My father hesitated, his wine glass frozen halfway to his lips. "She used to be our daughter," he said stiffly. The words came out cold, defensive. But the colleague laughed, completely missing the tension. "Used to be? Are you kidding? She's the most talked about actress right now. You must be bursting with pride." Other people gathered around wanting to see the magazine. Compliments flowed. Questions about whether they'd visited me on set. Requests for autographs. My mother's face flushed red, not from shame this time but something else. Confusion maybe. Or regret beginning to take root. They left the party early, driving home in heavy silence, my face staring up at them from that magazine cover the whole way. An elegant envelope arrived at my apartment 2 months later. Heavy cardstock. Embossed lettering. An invitation to a National Film Awards ceremony. My movie had been nominated in 3 categories, including Best Actress. I held the invitation with trembling hands, reading it over and over. This was real. This was actually happening to me. That same evening my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. The first direct message she'd sent in over 2 years. "Are you attending the awards gala?" That was it. No greeting. No, "How are you?" Just that single question. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. I typed back simply, "Yes." 3 dots appeared, indicating she was typing a response. Then they disappeared. No reply came. I spent the next 3 weeks preparing. Dress fittings. Interview prep. Speech writing just in case I actually won. My stylist kept asking if I'd be bringing family. "Will your parents be there?" she'd ask excitedly. "No," I'd say each time, forcing a smile. "They're busy." But late at night I'd wonder. Would they show up anyway? Did they care enough to try? Did I want them there or not? I honestly didn't know the answer. The night before the ceremony, I stood in my hotel room trying on my red carpet gown. Deep emerald green. Elegant. Sophisticated. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. When did I become this person? When did I stop being the scared girl who whispered Shakespeare under blankets? I thought about the little girl who wasn't allowed to perform in school plays. Who was told that art was worthless and dreams were dangerous. That little girl who cried herself to sleep, terrified of disappointing her parents but equally terrified of disappointing herself. "You did it," I whispered to my reflection. "You actually did it. Without their approval. Without their permission. You did this alone." But part of me, that stubborn, hurting part deep in my chest, still wished they could see me now. Still wished they'd be standing in the audience tomorrow night, proud instead of ashamed. I hated that I still wanted their validation. That after everything their opinions still mattered. I should have been over it. Should have moved on. But love doesn't evaporate just because it's rejected. It just sits inside you aching quietly. Flashbulbs exploded like fireworks as I stepped out of the limousine. The red carpet stretched endlessly ahead, lined with photographers and reporters screaming names. "Ava. Over here. Ava, this way." I felt every camera focused on me, every eye watching, every whisper assessing my dress and hair and makeup. The attention was overwhelming and exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Then I froze completely. My parents stood near the entrance behind the press barriers. They wore formal attire. My father in a tuxedo, my mother in an elegant navy gown. Our eyes met across the crowd. My father's expression was completely unreadable. My mother's hands trembled at her sides. Neither smiled. Neither waved. They just stood there watching me with faces I couldn't decipher. Reporters immediately noticed. "Ava. Is that your family?" someone shouted. Cameras swiveled toward my parents. "Can we get a family photo?" another yelled. My feet felt glued to the red carpet. Part of me wanted to run to them. Part of me wanted to run away from them. I stood paralyzed in the middle, the crowd's noise becoming distant white noise as my parents and I stared at each other across an impossible distance. My father approached slowly, walking carefully through the designated family area. He stopped a few feet away, maintaining that distance between us. "You look." He started, then hesitated. Searched for words. "Different." His voice was quiet, almost gentle. I smiled politely, that practiced smile I'd perfected for cameras. "Success changes people," I said. Not hostile. Not warm. Just factual. A reporter pushed closer, camera clicking rapidly. "Mr. and Mrs. Marin. Smile for a family photo." The request hung in the air. My mother stepped forward, nodding stiffly. She stood beside me, careful not to touch. No hug. No hand on my shoulder. Just proximity without connection. My father positioned himself on my other side. We stood there, 3 separate people pretending to be a family unit. The cameras went crazy, capturing this moment of false unity. I kept my smile fixed, professional. Inside, my heart was breaking and healing simultaneously. They came. That meant something. But they couldn't even hug me. That meant something too. Beautiful family, a photographer called out. If only he knew the truth. If only any of them understood that this polite distance represented years of wounds that hadn't even begun to heal. When they called my name as Best Actress, the entire theater erupted. The sound was deafening. Overwhelming. I sat frozen for 3 full seconds before my brain processed what happened. I won. Actually won. People around me were standing, applauding, smiling at me with genuine warmth. My director squeezed my hand. Go, he whispered. You earned this. I walked to that stage on shaking legs, just like the night my parents walked out of my college performance. But this time I wasn't scared. I was ready. The trophy felt heavy and solid and real in my hands. I approached the microphone, staring out at hundreds of faces. Somewhere in that crowd were my parents. I couldn't see them through the stage lights, but I knew they were there. Listening. To those who said my dream was shameful, I said clearly into the microphone, my voice steady and strong, thank you. You taught me to fight for it. You taught me that sometimes the people who don't believe in you give you the greatest gift, the chance to prove yourself to yourself. The audience responded with even louder applause. Some people stood. Then more. Within seconds, the entire theater was on their feet, giving me a standing ovation that felt like validation for every hard night, every rejection, every moment I doubted myself. Through the bright stage lights I spotted them. My parents were standing with everyone else. My mother's face glistened with tears that caught the light. My father's jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger. Not disappointment. Something softer. Something that looked almost like wonder. Or regret. Maybe both. For a long moment our eyes met across that vast space. Years of silence seemed to crack open right there. All the hurt. All the missed time. All the words we'd never said to each other. It hung between us like smoke, visible and tangible and suffocating. I didn't smile. Didn't wave. I simply nodded at them. Dignified. Acknowledging their presence without forgiveness or anger. Just recognition. The applause continued, washing over me in waves. I raised the trophy slightly, then walked off stage. Backstage I collapsed into a chair, adrenaline crashing, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the award. I'd done it. Despite everything. Despite them. Despite my own fears and doubts. I'd actually done it. And they'd witnessed it. That had to count for something. Even if I didn't know what yet. After the ceremony ended, people swarmed everywhere. My parents' friends approached them in the lobby, excited voices overlapping. Can you introduce us to Ava? Is she doing autographs? We absolutely need a photo with her. I watched from across the room as these same people who'd once asked my parents, "What's Ava doing now?" with barely concealed pity now clamored for access to me. My mother stood frozen, clearly overwhelmed. My father's face had gone pale. These were their colleagues. Their social circle. The people whose opinions had always mattered so much. And now those people were treating me like someone important. Someone worth knowing. The irony was almost beautiful. They'd cared so much about what these people thought. And now these people thought I was remarkable. A woman grabbed my mother's arm. You must be so proud. Imagine raising someone so talented. My mother's lips trembled. She opened her mouth but no words came out. My father managed to whisper, "Yes. She's remarkable." His voice cracked slightly on that last word. I saw something shift in his expression. Him maybe. Or realization of what he'd almost lost. What he'd pushed away because it didn't fit his definition of success. Later that night, after most people had left, my parents found me in a quiet corridor backstage. I was sitting on a costume trunk, trophy beside me, exhausted from smiling and taking photos for 3 hours straight. They approached hesitantly like I might run if they moved too quickly. "Ava," my mother said softly. "Just my name. Nothing else." "We were wrong," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "We wanted to protect you from failure. From disappointment. We thought we knew what was best. But we didn't understand. We didn't see you clearly." Tears ran openly down her face now. My father stood beside her, his hand finding hers. "We should have supported your dream," he added. "We should have believed in you." My eyes softened, but I didn't immediately respond. Years of hurt don't dissolve with one apology. "You don't need to apologize," I finally said quietly. "I didn't do this for an apology. I did it for me. But what I need now is simple. Just stop being ashamed of me. Stop wishing I'd chosen differently. My father's voice broke as he responded, "We never stopped loving you, Ava. Even when we acted like we didn't. We just didn't know how to show it. We were terrified of watching you fail." 3 weeks later, a photo circulated online. It showed me at a book signing event, pen in hand, smiling genuinely. Behind me, partially visible in the background, were my parents. My mother's hand covered her mouth, tears visible on her cheeks. My father had his arm around her, his own eyes shining. Both of them watching me with expressions that clearly showed pride mixed with regret. The caption someone had added read, "The actress who turned shame into pride. Sometimes the greatest revenge is becoming exactly who you were meant to be." The photo went viral quickly, shared thousands of times. Comments flooded in from people who saw their own family struggles reflected in that single image. In my parents' tears. In my independent smile. I watched it spread from my apartment balcony, the city lights reflecting in my eyes like stars fallen to earth. I held my trophy in one hand, my phone in the other. I didn't need revenge, I whispered to the night sky. I just needed peace. And proof that choosing myself wasn't wrong. The city hummed below me. Somewhere out there, my parents were probably seeing that photo too. Maybe they'd finally understand that I didn't succeed to hurt them. I succeeded to save myself. And maybe, just maybe, that could be enough for all of us to finally move forward. Together or apart. But forward nonetheless.